All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks again for joining us here at the Hot Topics studio at IFT FIRST. My name is Bill McDowell. I'm the editor-in-chief of Food Technology Magazine and vice president of content and channel strategy here at IFT. It's great to have you with us this morning. Today's session is sponsored by the Almond Board of California, who is a silver level sponsor of this year's IFT FIRST. The Almond Board partners with food professionals by providing technical research, consumer insights, sustainability education, and inspiration for the next generation of almond-based innovations. We're very excited today to explore how emerging technologies, particularly the intersection of artificial intelligence and metabolomics, are revealing new bioactives in almonds that can support personalized health. Researchers are using advanced analytical tools to uncover previously unidentified compounds in almonds associated with brain health, immune function, metabolic health, gut health, and even cellular aging. So joining us for today's discussion is Dr. Clay Bloszies, who's the Associate Director of Metabolomics at Brightseed, and moderating the discussion is Dr. Josette Lewis, who's Chief Scientific Officer at the Almond Board of California. Doctors, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us today. Clay, maybe I'll just start out and have you introduce yourself, and in particularly, what is Brightseed and what do you do?
Yeah, thank you, Josette. So I'm Clay Bloszies, as you mentioned, the Associate Director of Metabolomics at Brightseed. And our mission is really to uncover health benefits in food, plants, microbes, pretty much anything that we'll ingest. And we go about it in a couple different ways. There are a couple pillars that we base it on. The first is analytical techniques. So metabolomics is a big part of that. We try to measure as many compounds as we can across as many different samples as we can, whether they be foods, plants like almonds, or microbes.
Could you maybe talk about what metabolomics is in particular that's different from just compositional analysis, which many of us are more familiar with
Definitely.
Food?
Yeah. I'd say metabolomics takes a broader approach. We're not targeting specific compounds or specific nutrients. Rather, we are trying to capture the entire profile of a plant or organism. And in doing so, we're able to measure hundreds to thousands of different compounds within a single sample. And so once we have that information, I guess, what is the value of 1,000 compounds if you don't know what they're actually doing? So we use a layer of AI where we've trained models on 23 different health areas using kind of gold standard data that scientists have mined from publicly available resources. And using that, we're able to predict the bioactivity or the human health effects of each individual compound. And so we can say yes or no, are they bioactive? But we can also say, if so, which area are they likely to affect? And then the final part of it is validation, of course. And once we have a prediction, that really narrows down what areas we want to pursue. And it also gives us what in vitro tests or clinical validation we should go after to support those claims.
Great. Well, it's very notable that we've had about 30 years of almond nutrition research, looking at clinical trials and multitude of different health areas. And yet, despite that large amount of body of evidence, your company discovered some new bioactive compounds. So maybe tell us about the findings on almonds specifically, and if in particular there was something that surprised you.
Definitely, yeah. So when we looked at the almond varieties, we took 4 different varieties of California almonds and measured over 500 different compounds. 200 of those were lipid species, and the other 300 were other small molecule metabolites. And of those 500 plus compounds, about 400 of them had not been previously reported. We were uncovering novel structures in almonds that, as you said, 30 years of research is... We didn't start yesterday, and all of a sudden we're uncovering a ton of new stuff. And of those, we were able to find 17 bioactive molecules across a multitude of different health areas: heart health, metabolism, immune function, brain health. I think they were all covered earlier. But notably, 6 of those were new. So they had been reported in literature, but not yet associated with almonds. And I think the notable thing about those is that it pointed us towards different health areas that almonds traditionally hadn't been associated with. So things like even oral health, we were finding bioactives in that space that had showed some potential and might inform further research. And on top of that, actually, one other finding was in the lipid space, because I think that's an area that has garnered a lot of attention for almonds. We do know a lot about the fats that are in almonds and their benefits, but a lot of that research is targeted and is focused on very specific molecules. Like when we say saturated fats, we're talking about a couple different fatty acids specifically. But since we're able to take a larger look, we're able to measure hundreds of lipids that are comprised of fatty acids that will have a very similar effect. So just adding to the breadth of what we know about almond potential.
Right. I just wanted to double down on that because for our industry, which has invested significantly in understanding the health benefits, you've identified two things that are really novel for us that help us continue to build that evidence case of the health benefits of almond consumption. So as you mentioned with cardiometabolic health, where we just had a paper published this year that's a consensus evaluation of 30 years of research that really showed that almonds have a positive impact across the board on multiple components of cardiometabolic health, from weight maintenance to pre-diabetic aspects and so forth. But what is unique about your work is you've now identified some of the specific bioactive compounds that are linked to these health benefits. So nowhere in that 30 years did we get down to that molecular level, and it really reinforces the mechanism by which almonds achieve those larger scale health benefits. And then the other area that you mentioned, which is bioactive compounds that in the literature are linked to new health benefits that we've never researched before. Oral health, you mentioned men's health, joint health. These are all really interesting areas where perhaps there's an opportunity for us to dig deeper and look at whether that's clinically relevant for almonds. So two really important ways in which kind of this more molecular up approach can inform the clinical down approach that we've taken in our own industry to looking at almonds and health. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about the AI aspect? That is the topic of this conference du jour, I think. Great presentation this morning. So you have this sort of metabolomics component, and then you have an AI. Could you just dive into that a little bit deeper?
Yeah, I think the way we use AI is really to accelerate discoveries. We're not looking for specific answers out of it, but we're looking to kind of narrow the funnel and point us towards what areas we should go further in. I think that, as we talk a lot about AI, IFT and beyond, it's in our lives. It becomes clear that it's only really as valuable as the data you train it on. That if you're putting quality data in and training a model on quality data, you will get quality information out. But even in that case, it's still a tool that needs interpretation, needs quality control. So we see it as a way to take the vast chemical space that we profile it and narrow it down into what's really important and what we should actually look at. And that really is, much faster than traditional methods where either we know what we're looking for already and we target those specific compounds, or we don't know what we're looking for and we start at the bench in testing bioactivity for these things and then figuring out what is the basis for that. So instead of kind of testing the world of things, we can say, let's go for oral health through this mechanism, and here's the assay to validate that.
And as you say, the curation that your company does is linked to that value proposition. So it's different than if I just go to Google Scholar and run ChatGPT and get a whole bunch of stuff, some of which might not be that true or valid. Your expertise is added on to that. So that's sort of why it's worth working with a company like you to bring that validity and that extra value proposition.
Yeah, and on top of that, we've spent a lot of time profiling plants. We've profiled more than 5,000 different species and created a database of more than 7 million different compounds. So a lot of that rich information also makes it somewhat recursive, where we can inform our models and validate those models and make them better. So I think it's not only the data you feed it with, but then also kind of how you maintain that. And so in the case of almonds, it allowed us to uncover multiple new benefits, but I mean, there's a lot of space out there and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit across the board. So we see that in a lot of different plant species as well.
Well, as someone who's not a millennial, it's always interesting that this reinforces something that we heard this morning, which is that AI doesn't necessarily replace all of our jobs in the next 10 to 20 years. There's still a really important role for that expertise that we bring to the table. So AI is an assistance in the process rather than a replacement for what we as food scientists or others in this industry do.
Yeah, definitely. And you can't, as you allude to, you can't go and make an on-pack claim based on an AI prediction. I wouldn't necessarily eat something and think it was going to support my health based on an AI prediction. But it really is giving us the evidence that we need to get down to the level without wasting time on a bunch of different kind of extraneous avenues.
Right. So you mentioned front of pack claim. We have a lot of food companies here, folks that work for food brands. How does the kind of work that you do and the findings that are illustrated by Almonds here, how does a food company or manufacturer take advantage of that in thinking about how they develop products and how they continue to work in this area to bolster the opportunity for eventually a marketing claim around health?
I think part of it is around funding, so determining what areas to support. And it is, I mean, you're starting down a pathway towards those claims, whether it's getting the individual compound and taking that into the clinic, or whether it's fractionating or taking the whole food ingredient into the clinic. So I think that the results from studies like these will make that transition from discovery into clinical validation a lot faster and a lot more guided, where we're not, I mean, we can find what has the most potential and go chase that down the, I guess not rabbit hole because that's a waste of time, but a successful rabbit hole.
Right. Something that opens up to a beautiful world at the other end of that hole.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that definitely is an example in our industry where we use market insights to help us understand which areas of health are worth, which holes we want to go down, because ultimately that is why we fund nutrition research, is to link that to marketing of almonds as a food and as an ingredient. And again, you've given us some new insights about areas of potential health benefits based on that metabolic composition of almonds that we could pursue and potentially unleash new opportunities from a marketing perspective. So it's a great illustration of that.
Yeah. And I think on top of that, it also can guide some formulation and some product development where, and even processing steps. Where the way you process almonds, you might want to guide that based on preserving some of these health benefits, augmenting some of them with adding different ingredients, or, you know, I don't know, increasing them from different modifications.
Yeah. So you've had a chance to look at a number of different foods in the course of Brightseed's work. Is there anything in particular about almonds that surprised you in this research?
I think the main thing was how many non-lipid species contribute to human health. Just we had, as a field, known so much about nuts and fats, and I think that's most of what you hear about. But a lot of the polyphenols and other things that are less talked about but still have the same potential, I think that really stood out because you don't necessarily associate almonds with those. You might associate berries with we would expect that in a different matrix, but seeing that in almonds was really surprising, and yeah.
Well, we'd love to see almonds give blueberries a run for their money on antioxidants. So we'll definitely pursue that one further. Well, thank you. I think we can open it up for one or two questions we have time for from the audience.
So my question is, how could this research be used by the Almond Board of California to further consumer interest? How can this translate? So the question really is for you, Josette.
Yes. Well, that's an easy one to answer, because if you go back 30 years when we first started funding almond nutrition research, almonds were not considered a healthy food. They were an indulgent snack that you had in moderation and were considered fatty and not good for your health. And 30 years later, we do consumer research in all of our major markets, which are the United States, Europe, India, in case you didn't know, is a huge market for almonds, as well as other Asian countries. And that market research definitely is clear that almonds are considered a healthy food across the board. Still some work to get the word out that they do not contribute to weight gain, that in fact, almond consumption is part of a weight moderation diet, that satiety that you get from the fiber content and the healthy fats contributes to weight maintenance. But across the board, in all of our markets, almonds score very highly as a nutritious food. The key thing is for us to maintain relevance, right? What was important as a marketing of a food or as an ingredient 5 years ago may not be the topic du jour. So it's important that we continue to keep almonds relevant to new food trends and to new opportunities to connect with consumers and where they think about food as part of their health. So for example, right now we are doing some really interesting work around GLP-1 diets and almonds, which look like they will fit very well with some of the health challenges associated with GLP-1. So having enough protein for muscle management, also the fiber aspects. And again, just from this own research, looking at things like joint health, as we have aging populations, how can we bolster out the multiple benefits that you get from almond consumption? And ultimately, from the Almond Board, given that we're not a food company nor are we a brand, we're a source of a resource. So a resource to food companies to provide information that they can use in their marketing claims. An example of that was research we did several years ago that showed that the calorie content of almonds is actually lower than what shows up in the USDA database. Haven't managed to change that USDA database yet, despite the fact it was actually USDA researchers who did this calorie research. But there are brands who've used that new number because it is backed by science and publications. And so then that helps their marketing. We're currently working on a prebiotic, the data that will help companies make a prebiotic health claim on pack from almonds, because there's a lot of great data bolstered now by understanding the molecular content. So just a few examples like that.
And I think we do need to have that be probably the last questions. We're coming up on time. Please join me in thanking Drs. Blouzies and Lewis. A few quick housekeeping notes on this topic of AI and product development. Be sure to check out, we have a community conversation that's actually going to be beginning in about 15 minutes on leveraging AI and product formulation. That's going to take place at 12:15 over in the IFT FIRST bar, which is booth 4848. Go all the way toward the west end of the show floor. This interactive session is going to discuss tools that have been effective, how you all have used them, and some discussion around how to protect your intellectual property. So be sure to go over and check that out. If you bookmarked this session in the IFT mobile app, you're going to be getting an invitation, a notification to rate the session, give us some feedback. That feedback is very valuable to us in planning out our future programming, so we really appreciate that. Finally, over in the far corner, you'll see a Lucite stand with a QR code. Scan that QR code, get some points in your IFT app. We're going to be giving away some prizes at the end of the show. And then finally, if you did not get scanned on the way in, be sure to get scanned on the way out, because it's very important for us to also be able to understand who was here and our attendance, again, because it helps us inform future programming. So thanks again for your time. Thanks again to our speakers on this great topic, and we hope you have a great rest of the show.